Welcome to the Weather Insights Briefing. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney, along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner. This is Thursday morning, September 26th. Taking a look at the tropics, we now have Tropical Storm Isaac, which is moving straight east and no impacts to anybody except for shipping lanes. And then we have disturbance number one still down there in the southern Atlantic Basin, now certainly to become the next named storm with the chances up to 80% in 2 days, 90% for 7 days. And this continues to track west-northwest. And then want to just take a quick look at the Pacific. I've seen a few questions about John. This is Hurricane John, is it coming into the Gulf? Well, there's the track right there. So the answer is no. It is expected to make landfall again. There's hurricane warnings in effect for the southern Mexico coastline, and then expected to move inland, become a tropical storm by tomorrow, and then maybe back out over water as a depression. We'll see from there where it goes. But will it get into the Gulf? The answer is no. Of course, all of our focus is on Hurricane Helene. There it is, now a Category 2 storm, still tracking toward the Florida's Big Bend area, at least the center, with those impacts very far out from the center. You can see those rain bands, heavy rain bands moving into Florida. And we kind of have two broken, kind of a broken area of convection north with some dry air kind of splitting that. So little bit of formation struggling, I guess you could say. But then when you look at the wind field here, that orange area, that is the hurricane force winds, mostly favoring the east side of the eye all the way over to Florida's coastline and covering a good portion of Cuba there, about a third of Cuba west, where they still have tropical storm warnings on the west coast, even though they're getting hurricane force winds east of that area. But Helene moving off to the northeast, still expected to be a major hurricane when it makes landfall sometime this evening, Jeff.
Yep. So again, this graphic tells you a lot. First is this big wind field. This is a big storm. The tropical storm force winds extending outward over 300 miles from the center, and so we do have tropical storm conditions now in the Florida Keys and down along the southwest coast of Florida. You can see Key West here gusting to 52. The lower Naples here 38 or so, 41 now up at Tampa. So we are seeing the approach of the deteriorating conditions here on the west coast of Florida. Interesting this morning. This is the passes from the reconnaissance aircraft this morning. First thing is the center is now tracking to the right of due north, so a little bit toward the north-northeast. That was anticipated to happen. And you can see the wind field of Helene is a little bit asymmetric. So we have a lot of high wind over here on the eastern side of the system, not as much over on the western side. So a little bit asymmetric of the system. And you can see the wind maximum now starting to pull in toward the center here. So you can see this is the center of the storm. The wind max is here and here and here. So earlier today, we had kind of what we call a double wind max, where we had potentially an outer eye, or what we call a double wind, or an outer maximum sustained winds around 50 miles out. That appears to be contracting inward toward the center. Possibly Helene went through some sort of eyewall replacement cycle overnight. And typically you get this disheveled look that we have on the satellite image when hurricanes internally go through these changes. And so we're seeing that this morning, but we're seeing a lot more organization in the reconnaissance data here. The question is, does this big burst of thunderstorms you see on the north side of it currently, does that wrap around the center, really close off the west side, and we get a more symmetric system? If that's what happens here over the next few hours, that is when potentially we'll see much more significant strengthening.
Yeah.
The other issue Helene is having, and we haven't really talked a lot about this, the central pressure is way down there. We're talking 966 millibars. It's way low.
Yeah.
And Helene's wind field, the maximum winds aren't really representative of that low of pressure, especially in the Gulf of Mexico. And some of the reasoning is the wind field is so spread out. So it's like this figure skater idea where the arms are out, they're not in close, and so it's not spinning really fast near the center. But a lot of this energy is being spun out in a more wide area. So this is very similar to what we saw with Hurricane Ike back in 2008. You have a great big lumbering hurricane, but the wind field is spread out over hundreds of miles versus a very tight, tiny core. And those types of storms tend to strengthen more slowly versus when that tight core is developed. So we'll see structurally today how Helene evolves. If we can pull that wind field in, we could see more substantial strengthening. The point being is it doesn't really matter. You got a big wind field coming up to the coast. If it's a category 4, if it's a category 3, if it's a high end category 2, it doesn't really matter. The impacts are all going to be very similar. And this is the biggest thing we were trying to get that information across before Hurricane Ike made landfall, is that those big wind field storms are very capable of bringing big impacts to a big area. And this is the wind forecast for sustained tropical storm force winds. And you can see really far inland extent of the wind. This is both a combination of the strength of the storm at landfall, not the forward speed moving very quickly, and also that big wind field. And so we're pretty certain we're going to get hurricane conditions well into Georgia, maybe even central Georgia, and then at least tropical storm conditions up into North Georgia. That's Metro Atlanta, possibly even Western North Carolina. It wouldn't totally surprise me. I put this on here. This is kind of showing. I wouldn't draw in exactly. This is where the core of the wind is going to be. This can shift around a little bit, but the point here is the inland extent of this wind field. I mean, we're talking the potential here for wind gust 70, 80 into northern Georgia. Maybe even 60, 65 in Western North Carolina. Now, some of this is enhanced by the higher terrain of the Appalachians in this area. And so, but this is going to be just absolutely devastating inland wind, and the amount of trees that are going to come down, the amount of power outages. We're talking days, weeks of power outages here across the Florida Panhandle, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe even up here into eastern Tennessee with this type of wind. This is an area that's had a lot of rain over the last couple of days. It's not going to take a lot of wind to blow down trees and have issues up in there. So Metro Atlanta, you're hundreds of miles inland. Get ready. You have a pretty strong event coming in your direction there for North Georgia.
Yeah.
Or the big news is also down the coast is the storm surge. Really no change with this. And again, this is not as dependent on the strength of the storm as it is the wind field, how big the storm is. And this wind field is moving a lot of water already toward the coast. We already have coastal flooding right now at Clearwater Beach. Some of the roads are being impacted. The water level is going to start rising here over the next few hours on the west coast of Florida. So the time for evacuation is absolutely right now. You have to leave right now to get out of some of these low areas. These coastal low-lying roads are going to become inundated and cut off. And so the window is closing quickly if you're going to get out. And up in the Florida Big Bend area from, say, around Cedar Key all the way over to St. Mark and then over to Apalachicola, you've got to go. We're talking second story water level inundation along the coast. This is not survivable in this area with the wave action. This is going to be total destruction of anything on the coast in these areas up here. So you've got to get out. You've got to get out right now. There's just no time left for the evacuations up in this area, and you've got to move. And so again, flooding Tampa Bay, 5 to 8 feet. I was looking at some of the tidal forecast this morning in Tampa Bay. 8 to 9 feet is still being predicted. A lot of that's coming off the GFS model, so it may be slightly high, but this potentially is a modern day, record in this area. 8 to 9 feet would be pretty high in Tampa Bay. So there's definitely going to be impacts down here. Even though the hurricane's going well west of you, that onshore push and big wind field is going to bring some nasty conditions to that area. And then it gets really, really bad up here in the Florida Big Bend area.
Yep.
And then lastly, the rainfall pulled back a little bit on the numbers here, especially in northern Georgia. That's a little bit of maybe a silver lining, but bad conditions, likely dangerous inland flash flood potential here in the mountains of North Carolina, South Carolina, Northeast Georgia as Helene comes up, interacts with the front and the high terrain here and really wrings out this moisture. So wouldn't be surprised to see a foot, maybe a foot and a half of rain in a short period of time on top of wet grounds, on top of creeks and rivers that are already high in this area. And so this will be kind of a secondary disaster up here in the Southern Appalachians. You know, you get your storm surge and your big wind. And then as we get into Friday and Friday night, this kind of secondary big rainfall event as Helene decays up here. Don't sleep on it. A lot of people think, oh, this is a coastal thing. This particular storm is not just a coastal storm. You're going to have very significant impacts across a lot of the Southeast, a lot of travel disruption. You know, we have airport closures in Tampa Bay later today. There's no way Tallahassee is going to
Right.
stay up.
No.
Atlanta is going to be real questionable,
Yep.
and just a big area of significant impacts. And this is going to linger for a while. A lot of disruption that's going to linger for a while here.
Yeah, yeah. Don't not only not travel there today, but several days after. And yeah, that rain, that looks pretty scary there east of Chattanooga, south of Knoxville. And as you said earlier, Jeff, there's still, even though the higher wind and storm surge impacts will be in Florida, they are still going to get possibly hurricane wind, force wind gusts up in that area north or around Atlanta and northeast of there. So heads up for that. And we plan on doing another live stream this afternoon, sometime around 4 o'clock Central. So we'd love to have you join in on the conversation, join the chat, ask us any questions you like, either about Helene or anything about the tropics related. And if you're not subscribed, be sure to do so. Check in with our YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on those notifications so that you will know when we start our live broadcast. Jeff, thank you very much.